We're talking freshman recruits when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into the freshmen. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined as always by Andy Starr and Aaron Wilcox. And tonight we are going to be talking about the 2026 freshman recruits, aka the 2029 junior season or NFL draft class. We just talked about the 2026 NFL rookies. Well, why don't we switch it up a little bit, talk about the college rookies, the freshman recruits this time. We don't want to do every pod about the 2026 class, or at least not the 2026 NFL draft class. So we want to switch it up and do a little bit of everything, make sure you guys are informed. And it's that time of year. We have early signing day. We have the February signing day coming up, and I believe most of these players have already committed. Most of them have already signed, and most of them are pretty set. I guess we can always have some craziness, crazier things have happened, but it'll be exciting to talk about these players. And then once we get into spring sessions and all that kind of stuff, figuring out, is it actually working out? Kind of like we did last year. I think we did a pretty good job of, covering the recruits last year. That was the first time I had personally, kind of gone over all of them and knew these players to a certain extent. Aaron's obviously always been really good with that. Andy's just kind of along for the ride, but he's there to chime in whenever need be, and whenever we can talk about, could a player be buried on a depth chart or something to that extent. But yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, we got to check in with the boys. Andy, how are you doing? Things warming up for you?
They are. We're going to be above freezing this week for the first time in what feels like a month. So that's good. And yes, I'm here mostly for moral support. I don't, the longer that I've been playing C2C, the more I've just been disenchanted by freshmen in general. It's a necessary evil. Like, I understand we have to draft freshmen because they are lottery tickets. Like, some of these guys are going to be, your Jamar Chases, your Justin Jeffersons, and they're usually at the top of these recruiting classes. But like, the hit rates on them are just so disgustingly bad that it's been, difficult for me to get on board with a lot of them. But I understand, like, you still have to take a chance on some of these guys, and it makes sense to evaluate them as best you can. It just feels like something that I'm not going to invest my time in, but I am going to be here, like I said, for moral support and to look at these depth charts or do whatever I can in the background.
Aaron, Andy kind of sounds like I did when I first started looking into the freshman hit rates and all that kind of stuff. And you always tried to be more optimistic about that kind of stuff. What can you tell us to keep us optimistic here and should we draft freshmen? That's the question.
Right. Well, you do have to pick your spots, pick your opportunities to draft freshmen because, like Andy was saying, and like you've done some research about in the past, John, the hit rates are pretty low with incoming freshman players, but we can certainly do some nice things to filter out guys who are more likely to bust, maybe in not the greatest situations, because we know early career production matters, absolutely. And we also know that we can filter out pretty easy things, like if there's a high 4-star guy, but he's 180 pounds or something like that heading into that freshman season, we know that might be a lower probability bet to get a high end outcome there. But anyways, there's lots of considerations. We'll go through the players of course, that we're excited about. There are some ones that you both should be excited about that we're going to discuss today. So it's a very fun class. I actually think you guys should be excited for the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, even tight ends. Not that I've looked in depth into the tight ends quite yet, but the other positions, they're looking strong, and I've heard nothing but good things about the top four or so tight ends in this class, too.
I like it. Yeah, I have done quite a bit of research on it, and I have found that the hit rates are not amazing. If you go back to my articles at DLF over the past few years, I have found ways to make it better, and that generally revolves around the school that they're going to, and that's why you'll find me talking a lot tonight. And when we're talking about these recruits, about what school they went to. Like Aaron was saying, if they're 170 pounds, you're not going to hear me falling in love with them most of the time. As a running back, I don't care if you're 170 pounds as a wide receiver. If you're 170 pounds as a quarterback, that's probably going to be a problem as well. And if you're 170 pounds as a tight end, I would say that's a major issue. So yeah, but I will say I have like I have tweaked things this year in Freshbeth. I said that I was going to stick to my guns this year. I was going to try to stick to my ranks and not follow anyone else's this year, more so than I ever have. And because of that, I really did a deep dive into it and tried to figure out like where could I make this better? How could I make this better? And I kind of figured out that while school is important, maybe it's not as important as what I had led on to believe before, or at least when I was creating Freshbeth. And so I made a small tweak, kind of dialing that down a little bit, making sure that the composite score was holding its own and things like that. And also, I'm not, even though I am discounting players for a lower weight, I don't want to act like that's the end all be all and that they can't gain weight, because at least with certain players like Dier Hill from last year, he came in as a 180-pound prospect. Obviously, that's a pretty big knock. Next thing you know, Aaron's telling me he's 202 pounds. I can't find verified numbers on that, and I mean that's the problem with college football. So I can't say that's 100% accurate. But if people are saying he's 202 pounds and he came in as 180, obviously that's a giant difference, and something that needs to be considered. So when it's all said and done, I don't want to hold on to that weight too much, but I do want to use it as kind of a stepping stone into the ranks, if you will. So that's what I've kind of been working on here, and we'll get into all that kind of stuff here in a little bit. But first, it's time to have a little bit of fun, and it's time to guess the guy. Let's guess the guy. Alrighty, I thought I was going to be up this time, but apparently we're not 100% sure if Aaron's going to be able to make it next week or not. And so Aaron threw his sword down and said, "It is my turn to guess the guy." And so Andy is going to be hopefully giving him a nice difficult one so that I can jump into second place here and break this tie, the second place tie.
Yeah, so you guys gave me what I consider relatively easy ones. So I didn't want to get too spicy. I think I had Ian Strong and Ryan Wingo. Both pretty high end names as far as if we're talking NFL draft potential at this point. So I wanted to like keep it in that same vein. I don't want to give you too many hints, but go ahead, Aaron, if you want to shoot your shot in the dark here.
I'm going to go with Nate Shepard, Duke running back.
And I did contemplate doing running back. I just couldn't find one that really, I was falling in love with. But no, this is another wide receiver, unfortunately. Maybe I'll do running back next week, but probably not, John. Don't guess a running back next week.
All right.
But it is a wide receiver.
Yeah, man, wide receivers, and see that's the other thing too. Are we doing repeats? Well, I guess no repeats of guys that
no, we're done with the repeats now, or at least that's how it should be. I think now that we actually know who's committed to the NFL draft and everything, get those players out and just focus on who's in college. Yeah, and no freshmen as always.
Right. I'm going to go with KJ Duff, Rutgers wide receiver.
I contemplated Duff, but I didn't go with him. And you guys will have to remind me, is it year in school next or market share next?
It
Did
is
I?
the market share.
Okay. So this player's market share in 2025 was 17.5%.
Solid, but not spectacular. In fact, kind of below average. I mean, like, again,
Indeed.
not terrible, but yeah. I'm gonna go Bryant Wesco, Clemson wide receiver. I could see you getting a little tricky with me here.
Solid guess. He did have that injury shortened season. It is not Wesco, but it is a third. He will be going into his third year wide receiver. So same year as Wesco.
Ryan Williams, Alabama wide receiver.
As soon as you guessed Wesco, I was like, I think he's going to get it. And you did. And it was, in fact, Ryan Williams. You were on the right track
Nice,
there.
nice.
Congratulations. What does that give you? That's a 4-pointer or 3 points?
I
I think
suppose
it's
yeah,
four
because it's
because I
year
didn't
in
even get to
college,
conference.
right? Right. Sweet.
Wow.
Wow.
We're starting off a little too easy here, boys.
Next is going to be like wide receiver 89 in
Yeah,
the ranks for
Yeah.
John
no,
next week.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give John like whoever transferred in from Elon last year, something crazy.
Could
Can't
you
wait.
imagine?
All right, actually, Ryan Williams is a fun one to talk about because I feel like there's a lot of discourse online about Williams. I mean, there's people that are kind of like flat out done with him at this point and saying he's not nearly as good as people thought he was, and in this and that and everything. And then you have other people that are, trying to make excuses about what has happened and all that. I would definitely say that I'm closer to that side. I think this is more terrible quarterback play than anything else, which is part of the reason why I hate like yards per route run and all that kind of stuff. Because if you have a terrible quarterback who can't get the ball to the player, how are you going to blame the player? So yeah, how are you guys feeling about Williams? Because like I said, he definitely seems to be a divisive player right now.
Well, John, that you're talking about potential first round draft pick Ty Simpson, who is throwing him the ball this year. So I'm not sure how much
My
we can really
bad.
talk about quarterback. Yeah, excuse yourself. Um, no, I think it was obvious that he had some injury issues throughout the year. I do think the switch at quarterback kind of took some of his game away, coupled with that injury. But now you've got people out there saying, "Oh, he's going to get passed up by Latsier Brooks," and I just, I don't think that that's happening by any means. We do have the freshman season to look back on. I think when it's all said and done, there's going to be a positive regression towards his mean or his average, whatever you want to call it. And next year we'll be closer to back on track. It's just a matter of, getting more comfortable in the system, having another year and hopefully a nice healthy offseason under your belt. And things should be fine for Ryan Williams.
Yeah, he's such a dynamic talent. Ryan Williams is, well, he came out extremely young out of high school, coming out a year early, broke out into the college space just with some dominance and elite playmaking and speed. And I don't think that has suddenly disappeared. It's just some of the consistency, getting on the same page with Ty Simpson, and a matter of some drops and kind of lacking confidence, honestly. Some things that we saw out of like Xavier Worthy, for example, at Texas at times, with some of the quarterback play there causing a lot of drops, plus the player himself maybe not having as much confidence as he should, causing some more of those drops. At the end of the day, Ryan Williams, dynamic talent, should test well. Ultimately, he's not a Keishon Butte where there was like some sort of big injury causing him to really, fall down in production. I don't really think it's that, just those combination of factors that I mentioned. So he should get back on track this year. And yeah, just an awesome player. I think the NFL is going to like him. He's pretty perfect for what the NFL wants nowadays. But yeah, again, not as clean of a profile as we envisioned when we were ranking him in the same tier as like a Jeremiah Smith. But at the end of the day, I still have him very high in my Devy ranks, top 5 wide receiver in college football, talent-wise, still in my opinion. For fantasy purposes, CFF, there's more uncertainty, right? There's volatility with how he may produce this year, but can't doubt the talent.
No, absolutely. Like I said, I'm with you as well. I think he will have a bounce back. Obviously, things are changing there. We'll see what happens, but I really, I really think it was more of just Simpson dinking and dunking, and Williams was more of the deep play threat, and Brooks was the guy that they were dinking and dunking to and getting 6 yards a clip, and like yay. We saw that Alabama offense just not be the Bama offense that we've seen in the past. Brett is along with us for the ride tonight again, and he says, "Thank you. We appreciate you as well, my friend." But I believe that is enough about Guess the Guy. Unfortunately, I'm not in second place anymore, even though I have not gone yet. But we will have to see what happens with all that. But I believe it is time to dive into the freshmen. Alrighty, so like I said, we're talking about the 2026 freshman class or the 2029 NFL draft class. Either way you want to put it. I always confuse myself when I try to think of it both ways, and so I just say it both ways because sometimes I'll call it 2029, sometimes I'll call it 2026 freshman class, and we'll see what happens. But I have been diving into these players all weekend. Aaron's probably been diving in for weeks, if not months now. He said he's basically looked at just about everyone except for your tight ends. I actually have us pretty well covered on the tight end landscape, so we'll have to see if that. If we get into some of those names tonight, and then Andy's just going to sit there and look pretty for us for the most part. But why don't we dive in, Aaron? I think we should probably just go ahead and get it out of the way. So there's some people pretty excited about the Alabama running back going going over there, and could we possibly change the way the running backs at Alabama have been playing the past few years?
Absolutely. So we have Xavier Crowell going there, five-star running back, just a very solidly built running back. So he's just going to be a very efficient, good producer there for Alabama. He should be 66 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, and the guy can break tackles. He's pretty powerful. He can shed all sorts of would-be tacklers, and he's even got some lateral ability as a solidly built guy. He can catch the ball. He might not be as dynamic as the other tier one back in this class, but he's still very well rounded and very much a capable guy for Alabama. And maybe Andy can give us some context into the depth chart there at Alabama. But I mean, Crowell, he is an awesome talent. He is my RB2 in this class, but he's in the tier one, very much interchangeable in my opinion.
Yeah, I love the player. He's my RB1 in the class. Technically in a tier of his own, but not or not too far ahead of the second tier. It's really kind of like a mini tier, if you will. So I don't blame you for having them close or having him at two there. I just see the potential. You already have the size, you have the speed, you have like just about everything. They talk about his bend, his vision, his burst, all that. I guess he skipped his senior season, and so maybe people will get a little scared off by that. But it doesn't really seem to matter when you already have that size and the production profile that he's already put together. Now you start talking about going to Alabama. Andy, if he has anything to talk about with the with the depth chart here, can tell us. But as far as I'm concerned, there's not too much going on in Bama that we should be too concerned about. There definitely hasn't been for a couple of years now. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And maybe wasn't there a player that was going to transfer to Bama? Was it Hollywood Smothers was going to transfer to Bama and then decided to stay at Texas or go to Texas or whatever it was. And so I wonder if he got scared off by Crowell here.
Yeah, because right now, like their returning production is, names you've never really heard of: Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley. I know AK Deer was a highly rated guy last year. Um, in the opportunities he had, he did well, but still, finished with under 200 rush yards. None of these guys I just mentioned had even 300 rushing yards. And then as far as like transfer portal this year, it looks like they brought in a guy from Appalachian State, Khalifa Keith. I think he used to be with Tennessee initially. So, and he at one point was also a 4-star guy, but or maybe like a higher 3-star. But if what you guys are saying is true, there really isn't too much pressure for pushing back on Crowell to get early playing time, which is obviously what we want to see with these high end running backs. We want them on the field immediately. And at a program like Alabama, that's going to be very exciting for Devy prospects.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I did like AK Deer last year. I was kind of wondered why he wasn't getting talked about at all, as high of a recruit as he was. So I'm not. It's not to say that there's nothing there. Obviously, Daniel Hill and was it Richard Young were 4-star recruits. I mean, they're nothing to scoff at there, but I just think if we expected them to be what they were going to become, or if they were going to become what we expected them to be, it kind of already would have happened. We would have seen a little more of it, and so just the fact that it's completely wide open still leads me to believe that this is probably going to be Crowell's game before, sooner rather than later, when it's all said and done. I'm looking at it. I mean, he's a multi-sport athlete. He runs a 10.74 100-yard dash. I mean, there's not much to dislike about this player. Size, speed, everything that you want to see in an RB. So 6,000 rushing yards to his name while skipping his senior season. Yeah, I don't. I'm kind of enamored if you can't tell already. But Aaron, do you did I bury the lead here? You said you had another running back ahead of him.
Yeah, I do, but same tier. So again, no qualms with Crowell there. I do find myself a little skeptical on what the Alabama staff has done for running backs lately. Again, it might be just, again, the lack of talent there at Alabama, which is hard to say, right? I mean, or hard to even think and fathom that they could struggle with the success they've had for so many years at that running back position. But DeBoer bringing in a different system there has not got the most out of the running backs. Not saying Crowell can't exceed expectations, though, even if they're a little bit nuked compared to the old Alabama teams. But I have Savion Heiter, Michigan running back, another 5-star, very much similar frame wise. He is also young for the class, though he's not an early declaree into the college ranks. Very, very much a fast athlete. I found him to be more sudden, better lateral cutting ability. I just thought that there was a little bit more there juice wise compared to Crowell, but I think Crowell has potentially that more proven receiving ability from high school and just a bit more well-roundedness to his game. But Hyder, he just catches my attention, and Michigan's done an awesome job putting out running back production there for years. I know there's some changes coming to the team here, but I still think they're going to rely on the running back position very heavily. But the depth chart talk does make me think, well, there's still some competition there at Michigan, particularly Jordan Marshall, who's a solid back. Whether you want to say that if he's an NFL prospect or not, that's for a different debate, different day. But yeah, at the end of the day, Hyder is a super talented guy, hard to keep off the field because I think his upside is like the Jeremiah Love or like even a Saquon Barkley type if he really develops in the way that I think he could.
Yeah, and I have Hyder as my I want to say hitter. I know it doesn't even make sense the way it's spelled, but I want to say hitter. But I have Hyder as my RB2 in the class, so we're just flip flop there, but definitely up there. I question Michigan as a landing spot for Devy purposes a little bit. I push back a little bit. Like, what have we seen? Now, maybe you could say there's a little bit of bad luck there with, Justice Haynes not coming out this year, but he probably could have or would have come out and probably would have been the RB2 in the class, but he goes and tears his ankle or whatever he did right at the end of the year. Blake Corum kind of did the same thing with his MCL or his meniscus right at the end of his career there. Donovan Edwards was once considered a stud and probably like the RB1 or RB2 in some class. and then just I don't know what exactly happened to him. He forgot how to play football, or he like lost
Yeah.
his eyesight along the way. But I just wonder. I mean, where are these studs that we're hoping that he's going to become? Because it seems like all these like high end recruits and stuff have kind of been disappointments, and so I do worry a little bit. It's not enough to knock him down to RB5 or RB6 or something like that, but it is enough for me to knock him down. That being said, he also runs a little slower of a 100 yard dash there at 11:11 instead of what I say for Crowell, like 10:6 or something around there. I think it was, or 10:7. And I was just reading through his profile, and it said, like obviously he's an amazing running back, but he really hasn't done a lot in high school as far as receiving. And you know how we love our receiving profiles. So I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm not saying he won't do it or anything like that. But it is a little scary, especially what have we seen from these Michigan running backs recently. Like Justice Haynes really wasn't a receiving back, and then he goes over and he's still kind of not a receiving back, or as much as we'd want to see as far as like a workhorse or anything like that. So. It scares me enough to drop him down to two. I still really like the player. I don't want to sound like I hate him or anything like that.
Yeah, and we do have to be a little bit careful with the 100-yard times because a lot of times they're just, a sophomore year, what were they running compared to when, the actual player that they've developed into and become. So with him, like you said, maybe not the verified track times, but he's hit over 21 miles per hour on the field. And I think that's a little bit more impressive for sure compared to just, the good track times themselves. So I think there is a lot to be said about the electric nature of him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and Brett
and
agrees with the Alabama staff. To Aaron's point about the Alabama staff, obviously they have not had a solid running back since DeBoer got there. So, Andy, it sounded like you were talking.
well, I was just gonna say one thing about the Michigan situation, the guys you mentioned, how they haven't really developed anyone into a pro just yet. I know Blake Corum's had kind of a breakout in the NFL this year, so that there's something to remain to be seen there. But also, they're getting a new staff. Like they're bringing in Kyle Whittingham after Sharon Moore got fired. So I don't know if it's going to be the same Michigan. I know Michigan always tends to be Michigan in some facets, but Whittingham, you could say he's had success with running backs in the past. You could say what you want about Zach Moss and how people felt about him and how he turned out. He did have some successful seasons in the NFL, and he was very successful in college. So, there's stuff to fall back on as far as the depth chart. Yeah, with Justice Haynes transferring out, I think everybody who listens to us knows how I feel about Jordan Marshall as a pro prospect. So I don't think he's too much of a roadblock if Hyder is truly like a generational talent. And then Taylor Tatum came in from Oklahoma. I don't think he's anything anybody needs to worry about right now either. But again, he's just another highly uh, ranked or graded prospect when he was coming out of high school. So there is that. Maybe Michigan, the staff there, can unlock something with him to make him serviceable in some manner. But I think kind of similar to Crowell, like the depth chart, it has space in it right now for somebody to fill and have a role immediately.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess I think was it Aaron that was saying, or someone pointed out that Tatum might be playing like baseball or something like that, and so maybe he's not even necessarily going to be a factor, which is crazy because he was basically the RB1 in the class a couple of years ago. So it's how the mighty have fallen. Although I will say, I mean, it's not just me. I feel like everyone's kind of missing on these running backs the past couple of years because there really have not been that many good RB recruits, and we're seeing it in the NFL draft right now. It's been we're kind of in a dry spell here where obviously we had a bunch of studs there for a while, and now it's like you might be getting two a class, and that's if you really even believe that there's two.
Yeah. I think Tatum is playing defense there too, or at least they're trying to try him out there. So yeah, I don't know about the baseball. He's a good baseball player as well.
How the mighty have fallen. Alrighty, well, let's see. Aaron, you said you had a tier break after Hyder there, right? And I guess yeah,
Yep.
technically I do as well. I believe. I mean, it's a small tier break. I don't know that I hate these players, but I will say I haven't seen the player I have at three listed as a top five player everywhere. So it seems like there's definitely some concerns there, and I wonder if it's with the school more than the player, and if people are just looking at Oklahoma and saying Jonathan Hatton Jr., sorry, you should have gone to a different school because things have not been looking up for that program recently. And Taylor Tatum was just there, transfers out. Jaden Ott just went there, looked like a just a you know didn't even hardly get on the field, did not look like himself. There was hardly anyone that could do anything. It was like the fourth or fifth string running back Tory Blaylock that ended up basically being the stud, if you will, and even that you'd have to take with a grain of salt. So I believe I like the player. I like the talent. I generally speaking, you would say you like Oklahoma as a landing spot, but maybe not so much this year.
Right. Yeah. I think that some of your points that you expressed, concern wise with Michigan are much more true, particular with Oklahoma, right? The inability for DeMarco Murray to necessarily develop backs and utilize even some guys who've had success in other quote unquote lesser spots like Cal or other schools. So yeah, there's concern there, but being he's been kind of a consensus top five ish back for a while. Hadden, I know he hasn't been like in the one or two spots, but that's a credit to these other top end guys in Crowell and Hyder. But now Haddon Jr., I mean, he's got everything that you want from like a good size. He does have good testing times, but he wasn't that efficient in Texas, especially his senior year. At least I didn't find his production to be quite as impressive as I thought it would have come from a top five back. But he's like a no nonsense runner. Just likes to run downhill. He'll hit a defender hard. He doesn't really string that many tackles to get or tackles forced together. But I think he's a decisive, solid player overall. So I don't know. I mean, he kind of plays in a way like DeMarco Murray did. So maybe that will endear himself to that coach and that coaching staff. So again, a solid player. Like I could see like Caleb Johnson from like Iowa, being maybe somewhat of a similar player comp in some ways too.
Okay, so Andy's gonna be picking him up off of waivers soon. No, well, hopefully he'll have a better NFL career than that. But yeah, it's just a lot of the same things that you're looking at. The size, speed combo. Like I said, generally speaking, Oklahoma is has done well, and I have them as like one of the top tier schools to go to. I might have to change that if things don't get better this year because it has been at least a few years since we can say, hey, like they're pumping out the studs here at Oklahoma, and this is something that I'm working on constantly, but I'm trying to keep up. But generally speaking, and it's never really made sense to me, but it does seem to kind of follow the pattern. Generally speaking, these schools tend to follow patterns of if you put out quality production or quality players in the past, you'll put out quality players again in the future. And it's so weird how that works, even though you're changing coaches and players and everything else. But yet, here it is, like LSU still putting out, quality receivers year in and year out, and Ohio State's doing the same, and USC generally pumps out, quality quarterbacks and whatever it is, like there's just a lot of things that just tend to happen. So I guess I'm still kind of sticking to my guns of the research here and saying, hey, you got a high end prospect going to a high end school. I'm going to stick with them.
I just want to say that I like all three of these guys as like being near the top of the rankings, just based on like the situations they're going in. Because this is another wide open depth chart. I don't think anyone's running away saying Tory Blaylock's going to be the next anybody. And Xavier Robinson wasn't stellar either. They're obviously losing Taylor Tatum who and Jaden Dodd. Both of those guys barely saw the field. Like John Mateer is this team's main running attack at this point in time. So they need to add that aspect to their game if they want one Mateer to be successful, and also just to win games and get into the college football playoff. And then transfer portal, they haven't really brought anyone else in either. So similar to the first two guys, like this is just a wide open depth chart. Early playing time is, right there for the taking. He should be able to see the field on week one and then hopefully just take it from there.
I agree. And so, Aaron, you want to bring up? Do you have another player here in the same tier, or is there a teardrop for you here?
Yeah, no, I have a guy a tier ahead, so a tier better than Jonathan Hadden. And in fact, the tier that I have Hadden in, I have quite a few players. And that's not to say that there's not some differentiation. Like I wouldn't take a lot of those players maybe even in the same round, but that's just because yeah, there's a lot of players that I think I could get a little bit later who are also very comparable to Hadden. But no, there's one player that just is more dynamic. But the issue is the size, and we've talked about him a little bit so far this week as you guys have dove into this class, and that's KJ Edwards, who's going to Texas A&M. He's still a consensus top 5 back in recruiting services. He has back-to-back state championship offensive MVP awards. He's kind of a smaller guy, like 5'10", 187 is his listed weight on the Texas A&M team site. However, if you look at like his junior year size, it's 180, and so it makes you question some things. But there's also half the guys at the running back position are like 180 when you're looking at their like sophomore junior year weights. So I'm just wanting to be a little bit patient with writing off KJ Edwards in these early stages because he's such a productive, efficient back. He's a great receiver, great track times on the field. His speed is elite with that lateral agility and string together jump cuts, just as good as anybody in the class. So he has the balance and patience, elusiveness, and even some physicality for being a smaller guy that just makes me really love him. But I'm not going to have him in tier one because he's not there yet. I mean, you can't when he's not even 200 pounds. He's not close to that yet at this rate. And so maybe he is one of those smaller guys who never truly gets there. That's the risk, but the upside I think is worth the squeeze because we're seeing in today's NFL just how these dynamic, versatile backs can excel. Whether it's the Bucky Irvings, Devin and Chain, you go down the list, and James Cook, you don't have to be 210 plus. For sure, but it's nice to be up in the 190s. We want to see that out of KJ Edwards here soon.
Yeah, I have him at 5, and honestly, he was lower for me, but that was when I originally had him listed at 180. Like I said, I'm trying not to have the weights be the end all, but at the same time, I'm trying to just consider like how much can these guys actually, how much weight can they possibly gain? Are we still going to be dealing with the issues of, oh, they're only 192 pounds, or they're 195 pounds, or whatever when it's all said and done? And obviously, we've seen players that have hit Devin Achan and Jameer Gibbs and James Cook and other players that have hit sub 200 pounds. It's obviously not that it can't be done, but there was obviously a lot of questions with those players, and we can't say that every team would even be willing to give those players workhorse touches. And so that's still a concern in the back of my mind. I try not to be the size guy or the weight guy or whatever when it comes to these players, but with running backs, I do tend to follow it a little bit more. So that knocks them down a little bit for me. Texas A&M isn't a terrible landing spot or anything. In fact, it seems like they're kind of rising up the ranks as far as a school and a program and everything. So I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's not terrible, but KJ Edwards seems to be like a solid running back, just not quite the size I'm looking for, which is why I still have. And it looks like we lost Aaron for a minute, but it looks like he is coming back. But I actually have Deshaun Rideau out of USC, 5'10", 202 pounds, a solid 4-star prospect here. And yeah, Aaron's definitely having some issues. He spilled beer all over his computer. That is a problem. Hopefully, he can get that cleaned up, and not ruin his computer. That would be an issue. So I'll just sit here and talk about Deshaun Rideau. Like I said, size, speed combo, going to USC. We've seen a lot of great things, a lot of great players heading over there, and it's a program that I tend to covet players once they land there. Maybe not the running backs as much, But I think that that's going to be a solid offense this year. Again, I believe they're bringing back Maeva. Is that correct? And then, so I feel like we're going to have continuity with that team and everything. I don't know if that we can say Rideau is going to be the starter right away or anything like that. But I also don't know that there's no, that there's a lot of talent blocking him at all either.
Yeah. Well, this depth chart is certainly going to be a lot harder to crack than even Texas A&M. I know Texas A&M has Ruben Owens who played better last season, but I don't think anyone's going to run away and say he's this top tier NFL guy at this point in time. But he certainly could be a block in the road for at anyone going to Texas A&M because this will be his fourth season, and in years past they have, and in last year especially, they weren't really like a super heavy running team, so seeing significant playing time might be an issue. As far as USC is concerned, I'm a little bit concerned that it might be a lot more difficult to see the field as a true freshman this year, based on how Wayman Jordan performed last season, and then when he got injured, King Miller stepping in. I believe both of those guys are going to be back at USC as well. And you mentioned continuity of the offense. Well, those guys are part of that continuity, and bringing in anyone, even if they are a high four-star running back like is it Rideau? I'm just here to look good, remember? But the just having that level of experience on your team already, guys that you're comfortable with, is going to be difficult for a freshman to come in and carve out any significant playing time without some sort of injury, which we've seen can happen, obviously, on this USC team. It seemed like every running back on this team, not named King Miller, went down with something or another at some point this season. But as of right now, if everything remains the same, I wouldn't be too high on him compared to these other guys. I would rather take a shot at any of the other three or four guys we've talked about before going towards Rideau.
Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, I can't say that you're wrong. And honestly, I forgot about Wayman Jordan coming back. I can't remember exactly what his injury is. If he's going to be there from day one, then maybe that will hold him back. But that being said, generally speaking, we're not sitting here going, these guys are going to touch the field year one and be Bijan Robinson or anything like that. We've seen guys, even like you mentioned Ruben Owens, like he wasn't much of a player until like year two or three, and players like that. Obviously, Justice Haynes, we wouldn't even consider a Devy option until this past season. So I don't know that we can. Oh, and Brett says he hopes Aaron's computer's okay. Unfortunately, Aaron just left us, so I don't know if his computer is okay or not. I guess we will find out in real time. But we
We're all
said we were going
praying.
to do this. We said we were going to do this as a team, but we definitely trust Aaron's recruit.
I was
Uh,
gonna say, like, the one guy
yeah,
who
the one guy we
probably
couldn't
knows
lose.
the most about all these prospects. He's gone now.
It's okay though, and I know he likes KJ Edwards. I think we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna let him hopefully come back and be back in a little bit, and we'll talk about the rest of the running backs when we get back, or when he gets back, I should say. But I'm gonna go ahead and get into the wider, or no, I'm gonna get into the QBs because I feel like there's not that many QBs to be like overly excited about, and that's mostly because of landing spots. Now, that's not to say that there's not good recruits because there are high end 5-star and even high end 4-star recruits that are going to teams. The problem is they're going to teams like Houston, Vanderbilt, BYU, like Arizona State, teams like that, where we're sitting there going like, okay, so you're gonna have to transfer to be anything. You're gonna have to transfer just to become a stud, to become the 101 overall in the NFL draft or whatever it is. And so now you're already adding in, uh, you know, possible adversity to to their profile. I hate that that I look at it that way, but I feel like you have to. And it brings me back to obviously a different position, but it brings me back to Micah Hudson from a couple of years ago. There were people that were pushing Micah Hudson up into the Jeremiah Smith tier and saying like he's the same level of prospect as Jeremiah Smith and he's a stud. Yeah, I understand taking Smith first, but he should be second and yada yada yada. And I'm sitting there going, well, like dude's going to Texas Tech. If he was if he was this amazing player, he'd be going to Ohio State. He'd be going to LSU. He'd be going to wherever. That pushes out these wide receivers, and yet he was going to Texas Tech. And I can't. I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn because he seems to have been a head case and things, but maybe that's why. He went to the school because he was a head case. He went to the school because the other schools were like, hey, yeah, you're not really for us. And so I'm not trying to put anything onto any player. I do not know them personally. I'm not saying that is why. But Keyshawn Henderson going to Houston when you're a .9993 composite graded player, why are you going to Houston? I don't understand. You're not even going to start this year most likely because Connor Wegman's coming back for his senior year. I don't even think you're starting this year. So you're going to Houston to back up Connor Wegman as a high end 5-star recruit. I just don't get it.
I'm gonna try and explain it. Um, and it's based on this transfer portal NIL society field we live in right now. The top tier teams are outsourcing their quarterback development to these lower programs. And look at the last look let's go back to like 2021, the top quarterback class, quarterback recruits from that year. You had JJ McCarthy, you had Caleb Williams, and you had Drake May, all really good guys. And then after that, like who did you have in 2022? There was nobody. I mean, you same thing in 2023. You could say Arch Manning, you could say Dante Moore. They might have actually been 2020. No, they were 2023. Or yeah. So there hasn't been like this wealth of quarterback development. You've got busts all over the place with Jackson Arnold and Connor Wigman, like you just mentioned. You've got Malachi Nelson. It hasn't worked out. And the top teams like Ohio State, I know they brought in Sayin and had him developed, but before that, they're outsourcing their QB play to other programs. Um, so I think what's happening is these top tier prospects are saying, well, let's go to like a Cal or a Maryland or somewhere where I can get on the field immediately and develop there. And if I do, get to a top level of play, maybe then I can transfer somewhere else. And I think that's what we're seeing right now because now like who are the top? You have Fernando Mendoza being the top drafted player this year. Last year it was Cam Ward. These guys weren't 5-star recruits like we were used to seeing. Usually the first quarterback in a draft was a 5-star quarterback. Like in 2019, you had like C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. These guys, that might have been 2020 actually. I think DJU was in that year as well. So that's what I think the reasoning is. Like they're saying, well, let me go somewhere where I can get on the field immediately, or at least as close to immediately as possible, because it's not working out for Hussein Longstreet, who went to USC, and now he's got to transfer to sit behind Sam Levitt for a year. So that formula isn't working for these 5-stars anymore because teams are just outsourcing. Like USC outsourced Jaden Maeva, and now he just won't leave. So it's just that's what I think the reasoning is.
I don't know if Aaron can hear us or not. We do seem to have him back. We were talking about Keyshawn Henderson going to Houston and how, he's such a high end prospect, but yet the landing spot is so questionable. And Andy was trying to push back a little bit and say this, this is probably more of the landscape that we're in now. Players just trying to go to a school and start and showcase themselves and then transfer up. I guess I'm looking at it more as a negative of like, if you're that quality of a prospect, why are you going to Houston? Oh, and we cannot hear you.
Oh no.
This is a nightmare for Aaron. I'm sorry, buddy. All right, well, I guess we will wait for him to try and fix that. Uh, that's enough about Keyshawn Henderson. I actually have. I mean, I have Henderson, and he seems to be the QB1 for just about everyone. I have him as my QB3, and it's because of the Houston landing spot. I can't get overly excited about it. That being said, he is a high end prospect. I can't hate on him too much. I have I have another one, and it's kind of like what you're talking about with Henderson going to, or I'm sorry, with Hussein Longstreet going over to Texas, transferring over to Texas. We also have Dia Bell going to Texas, and he's another high end prospect, 0.9917 in the composite. But he's going to Texas. He has to wait a year for Arch at the very least, and now you're fighting or duking it out with Hussein Longstreet as well. So I can't say I love that landing spot either, even though obviously you love the idea of him going to Texas and what they're building there and what they're doing there. I love that, but can we guarantee that Diabell is starting next year? I don't think we can do that.
Well, I think Hussein Longstreet went to LSU, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
So,
you know what? I was confusing the two. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
I'm looking to see if Texas brought in a quarterback transfer. They did bring in MJ Morris from Coastal Carolina, but I don't think
He's
that's
not
anyone.
stopping anyone. I'm so sorry.
I
Yeah,
don't think
I,
he's
I
get.
I don't know why I was confusing Texas and LSU, but it absolutely was. I was thinking Houston Longstreet was was there at Texas, but that makes me feel a lot better. Even then, you're absolutely waiting a year. Uh, you
Yeah,
know, no matter what, which is fine. It's not like these guys have to start day one or anything. But we just saw the same thing with Hussein Longstreet. Of he was waiting a year and then he transferred out. So we don't even
right.
know exactly, like, just because they're waiting a year doesn't mean they're starting year two day one, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean we see that a lot too, like Devin Brown going behind C.J. Stroud and waiting a year, and then all of a sudden getting beat out by Kyle McCord, and now nobody knows who Devin Brown is anymore. So it's possible that he starts next year, but it's also possible that Texas goes to the transfer portal, like I was talking about with outsourcing their quarterback development. Maybe they feel Diabell's not ready to take a team to the college football playoff in year two and say, well, let's go grab this guy from Texas State who's he's started 75 games and is in his eighth year of college. We'll get him to take us through another gap year, and by that time, Diabell maybe says like, no, I want to play right now, and ends up transferring to Boise State or something. You never know. Like all this stuff is possible with the way that college football works right now. Nobody has patience anymore, the teams or the players. So he could be on Texas and be starting for them in 2027, or he could be somewhere completely different.
Yeah, and I'm not hating on any of these players. If anything, I do like the QB class at the top. Obviously, it falls off pretty quickly, but that's pretty normal for just about any QB class. So I don't know that that's anything out of the ordinary there. But that brings us to my QB1, and unfortunately, it does not seem like we're going to get Aaron back at this point. Although, as I say that, he's joining the lobby one more time. Let's try it out. Aaron, can you hear us? Or can we hear you is the better question. And he's gone again. So, uh, yeah, so that brings us to my QB1. And I have to question this one a little bit too, just because of the landing spot. But I really kind of fell in love with Faison Brandon going to Tennessee. We know that Tennessee has definitely not pumped out the most quality QBs as of as recently, but I don't know that they've had this kind of high end talent. Obviously, they had Nico, and everyone fell in love and thought he was going to be the next coming. That did not work out. Could this be the player that we were hoping Nico was going to be? And the thing is that when I wasn't as involved with recruit rankings and all that kind of stuff when Nico was a freshman, so I didn't really know too much about him. but everyone seemed to fall in love with him. He was an absolute stud, right? And then when it actually came time for him to play, everyone's like, well, yeah, he doesn't really run that much. He's not that mobile, and he's not this, and he's not that, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, then what's the point? Why did we think that he was still like the most amazing player ever? I think we can say that we can't say that about Faison Brandon here. I think he's very athletic. He's a high end 5-star recruit, and he has the athleticism. He he has the size, everything you want, and he's going to a quality program that is maybe not pumping out NFL talent as much as we would like to see. But like I said, I think that's more of a who they've had problem than an actual scheme problem or a team problem. And so you actually get them a quality quarterback, and we could see a completely different story. Aaron, do we finally have you back?
I don't know. There's definitely some damage going on with the
Oh no,
computer, so
but
I
we
think the
can hear
computer's
you
pretty
though.
toast. Great. One
uh,
last Devy devotional podcast on the computer here.
I'm
Seems to be
Oh,
pretty
sorry, man.
toast.
That's a terrible feeling. Hopefully, it
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
anything new or anything like that.
No, it wasn't new. I was thinking about getting a new one anyway. So
Okay,
I
that
did
a
I
little
did
better.
get back in time just to hear you hyping up my quarterback six in the class, Faison Brandon.
All right, yeah, we're gonna be fighting about this one because I mean, what do you? Is it because he got injured his senior year? I mean, that like what are we hating on Faison here? He's got size, athleticism, high end prospect, like going to a solid
Yeah.
SEC school. Why are we hating on Faison Brandon here? And
Yeah. Well,
we're gonna put guys going to Houston and Vanderbilt ahead of him. Come on now.
so that's the thing. Vanderbilt is also an SEC school. It's not like Tennessee is some
It,
sort of
it
better school for developing talent.
SEC. It's SEC. Come on now.
Well, look at the season Diego Pavia just had. And imagine if he had the size of a Jared Curtis going to Vanderbilt, clear five-star guy, um, with the
Well,
whole
Andy will tell
backing
you
of,
no one's as good as Diego Pavia. Come on now.
well, exactly. But top five Heisman guy. If he was a couple inches taller, the NFL would actually be interested. Jared Curtis has the arm talent that's just out of this world. Now, I am going to say that Faison Brandon is not a bad player. So I kind of give you a little bit of crap there for having him so high. I still have him in a very high category. I like the top six-ish quarterbacks a lot in this class. And he's in a tier where I could have him as high as about four. I could even squeeze them up to three if you really want. But no, Tennessee has done a poor job of developing quarterbacks. Like you said, maybe it's been because of the talents there. They've brought in 4 5-star type of guys before. It does not translate to the NFL with the reads, with the type of system they put out there. And there's some question marks for me with his play. He does have a lot of good things going for him, though. His high school production was solid, but he is not the dynamic dual threat that Keyshawn Henderson is. And Jared Curtis has the superior arm and some of the superior production as well. So I don't think that Diabell for me is not quite up with Curtis and Keyshawn Henderson, not because of talent whatsoever. Talent wise, he's up there. Diabell going to Texas, unfortunately, he has missed considerable time. His
Hmm.
junior season, he had some sort of season-ending injury there, and then he ended up missing that, affecting and missing his senior season. Unfortunately, Diabell has just struggled staying on the field, and we just don't know how that's definitely stunted his development and his plays as a quarterback going into college. He'll have limited reps this year because he's sitting behind Arch, so the guy hasn't really played in multiple seasons. That's my issue with Diabell. Yeah, so Faison again, good as far as a lot of the things that you're looking for with high recruit ranking, the size, solid enough production besides missing a little time with a thumb injury senior year. So Faison, not a bad bet whatsoever. I think I'll be taking him in the second rounds if he's dropping there in supplemental drafts. I've seen him there in mocks like early second. I'm comfortable in that range with him for sure.
The other thing I like about Faison here is he's only 17 years old. I don't know exactly when he turns 18, but it's sometime after like football starts, after this at least spring starts or whatever it is. So he has plenty of time to learn and to get better and to become a better prospect. But he just has like a lot of the things that I look for to become those high end fantasy players. And then you add in going to a pretty high end or high ish end SEC school, and I definitely love that. But I have to agree with Aaron, regardless, even if we disagree on that player in particular. I have I have five players that are all very close. Technically, there's like I would say the way that I have it is I have Faison kind of in a tier of his own, but that might not be fair. I don't know. They're close enough to where you could really have four of them all in tier one, and then a fifth guy almost like by himself in tier two. But it's kind of like nitpicky and things like that. But I do tend to agree that there's five quality players, and then there's some other ones that I actually like behind that aren't that far behind.
Yeah, right, right, right. I will say that Keyshawn Henderson, he is much more of a like you're just betting on such dynamic rushing abilities, and you're kind of ignoring the fact that, like you said, he went to Houston. He's probably gonna have to sit a year there. He hasn't developed on his frame yet. He's kind of a one-hit wonder. Like there are red flags for sure with his profile, but it's just such a fun profile. Like you want to take a shot at it and try to get the next Lamar Jackson type of player. But yeah, I don't really see much again separation for me for like Vanderbilt versus Tennessee as far as putting out like NFL production, but for college fantasy, I mean, I like the Tennessee offense more. And we haven't even talked quarterback wise about Jonas Williams going to LS or USC for Lincoln Riley or Jake Fetty going to ASU, who is also a dynamic player in this class. Some people have him like in the top three, and he's just got great, great rushing abilities plus passing production too. So that's Jake Fetty going to ASU, who I have in my top four. Oh, muted. Sorry.
Mm.
Sorry about that. We were talking about this while you were gone, Aaron. Like is are we in a different age now where like it doesn't really matter that you're going to ASU? Obviously, we know like Jaden Daniels worked out, but it wasn't because of going to ASU, and it was a fifth year prospect, a fifth year player, and there was a lot of doubt of he would ever become anything before he actually did become something. So this wasn't like from day one you're going, oh, Jaden Daniels, amazing, or anything like that. So are we sitting here going? And now we lost Andy's recording. We're having a rough night here, but um, is this just a different day and age where you don't truly care about where they're starting? You're just saying this is a player that I like, and I believe he will end up in a quality position because I have to say, I mean, the whole basis of Fresh Best research is you're going to ASU. I have to knock you.
Yeah, and it's fair to a degree, but with today's transfer portal era, like I'm putting more stock into the individual talents and some of the high school production and all those other factors going into it, and a little bit less about the landing spot. So, for example, you could see guys um, go to lower levels of competition, but if they're a five-star, I truly believe in the talent and opportunity there. I can't knock them too much for it. Now there are those atrocious decisions you will see from time to time where I think maybe it's more obvious to knock them, but for the top quarterbacks in this class, no, not holding the landing spots against them for again like a ASU or Vanderbilt. Not significantly, no. I will say Ryder Lyons going to BYU. I really liked his film. Oh, you're muted again, John. But Ryder Lyons, yeah, I just don't like the BYU landing spot. Like he's just going to be blocked for sure by Baron Blockmeyer.
Brett says Aaron's a warrior. Can't even tell he's mad about his laptop. He's right back into business. That's right. Um, yeah, and I was actually just about to ask you, and apparently I'm not having any issues. I'm just having mental issues. I keep not unmuting myself. But I was going to ask you about Ryder Lyons. Technically, he is a better, at least according to the composite, he's a better recruit than these guys like Jake Fetty and other players that you're talking about, and yet going to BYU, you're saying, "Oh, this is terrible." Well, is it that much worse than going to Arizona State or or going to like possibly sit behind like sit behind Connor Wegman in Houston.
Yeah, the way I view it, and maybe Andy should chime in here too, because I know he's a Bear Bachmeyer fan, but Bears, I mean, he was a freshman this last year, true freshman, so he's got 2 more years there. It seems like he's just carved out that starting role for BYU. I just really don't want to wait 2 years. And yes, he can transfer out, but why invest in a guy who's probably going to be a year one, nothing, and then has to transfer out and hope he gets a role somewhere else, unless they're like such a high end guy like Houston Longstreet, where you're like, eventually he'll get a shot. Well, he could be like a Malachi Nelson or like guys like that who just you think, oh yeah, eventually they'll get a starting role somewhere, but it's just not likely, right? I just don't see him outperforming Bear Bachmeyer coming in. Versus, I do think the heir apparent there at ASU is Fetty. I do think that Jonas Williams at least has a shot with Lincoln Riley, which I love that connection. And then same thing with like Diabell, uh, and Keyshawn Henderson. Like those guys are the next guys up. Obviously, some NIL, a lot's being invested to try to bring them into those situations. Rider lines, just for whatever reason, I just don't want to wait multiple years. That's all.
Yeah, and I will say, I having done this research, and I'm not saying I've gone through every single player, every single recruit, but just looking over the years, there's so few QBs, at least over the past handful of years, that have been lower than like a 0.95 in the composite index score that have done anything. As far as like for Devy purposes, obviously, like the CFF is a completely different ball game. But for Devy purposes, the only one that you could possibly even really say is Carson Beck. He was a 0.910 as a composite score, and obviously we know at one point he got bumped all the way up to QB1, but we also know where he finished. So I feel like that was more of like a the little a little fake bumping, if you will, or something. But and just going back through the years, there's so few players that turn into anything from that from below that 0.95. It might even be like point Sam Howell's the closest one that I can really come up with from 2019. It was a 0.958. Everyone else is like 0.96 or ahead or above there, and that's not to say all of a sudden if you're 0.96 you're guaranteed anything, because that's definitely not the case at all. I'm just saying that when they do hit, it's from the 0.96 or above. And that's why I get a little scared with your Jake Fetts, your Jonas Williams. Those guys are sitting at 0.9508 and 0.9507 respectively. And we have not seen any talent come from that level of a composite score. I'm not trying to say composite score is everything, but I'm looking at the past 6 years and saying it hasn't happened.
Fair enough. That's a lot of that's a lot of talk there, Andy. What do you think about what do you make of these situations and the I mean just a process, I guess, into going and evaluating these incoming freshman quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say I'm with you on Ryder Lyons and BYU. I think that's going to be a real tough depth chart to crack, just based on Bear Bachmeyer kind of solidifying himself as the starter there. But I'm with John about the composite score, but I'm also kind of not sure about it right now because of the last 2 years where we've seen these transfer portal guys, the like Cam Ward and now Fernando Mendoza come out and be the QB1 in their respective classes. Now, obviously, Cam Ward hasn't done anything to say he's going to be a superstar in the NFL. It remains to be seen with Fernando Mendoza. I know Jackson Dart, I think we're all comfortable that he's going to be something in the NFL, and he would have met that .96 composite score. So, I'm with John there that the data says one thing, and that's what we have, and that's what we should go by. But we're still so new into this NIL, these teams bringing in Jaden Maevas and Fernando Mendoza's to be their starting quarterbacks, and all of a sudden they're vaulted into potential NFL draft talk. I don't know if that's going to be the norm moving forward, or if it's going to be more like what we see with some wide receivers where 3 and 4 star guys can. And Now that I'm thinking about it, I think Justin Herbert was a 3-star prospect. I know that's going back a little bit further than 6 years. So it has happened. Maybe not in recent memory, but there's certainly been plenty of 3-star quarterbacks that have turned around and been first round picks, 3-star or below, in Cam Ward's situation. So it's not unheard of. But it is certainly, at least in recent memory, hasn't been the norm. But as we're seeing now with Mendoza and last year with Cam Ward, that's not necessarily always the rule either.
I actually found one 0.942 in the composite score from 2018. Tyler Shuck made it and is a second round pick in the NFL draft. No, I mean, honestly, I honestly just saw that, but I wasn't even looking for that. I was trying to see if I had Herbert, but I think he was a year earlier, and I didn't go past 2018 in this research. But I think Andy kind of made my point for me. It's not to say that no one can come from below these grades or anything, but it doesn't seem to be the 9.5s and the 9.4s. It seems to they come from nowhere. Cam Wards and they come from FCS schools and things like that. They don't necessarily come from your 3-star, your 4-star, and your low end 4 stars or whatever. The funny thing is, if you look at like LSU wide receivers from the past few years, the ones that have hit the biggest, the players that we absolutely love, and this is going to wide receivers, not for not QBs, but the players we absolutely love, Jamar Chase and Malik Neighbors were 3-star, like low end 3-star players. Like these were not high end prospects. And it's just something that I've picked up on over the past few years is like, for some reason, there's certain schools that seem to have like hits that just kind of come out of nowhere. And when those players hit, they tend to be amazing. And I don't know how we can actually figure that out. Or, like, I don't know that there's a way of actually saying, oh, because it's this school and you're a low end 3-star prospect, you're going to be a stud. But if I ever do figure that out, I'm going to be a millionaire. But I thought we were going to be able to do all this in one night, but I guess that was probably a little naive of me. There's obviously a lot of recruits, a lot of players, so I think we should probably push this discussion to next week, unless we want to go for another hour. I'm fine, but I know Aaron has a computer to buy, so he should probably get to researching before this one completely dies. What do you guys think? Move on to next week and. We'll have a lot more time to dive into the wide receivers, the
Yeah,
tight ends, and maybe even get into some sleepers as well.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And sorry I cut out with the running backs there. I did start to hear you talk about, um, was it Rideau that you were talking about at USC,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Who is a fun guy? I have him ranked pretty high too within my top 10. Jonas Walton, Notre Dame back, as well as Javion Osborne, Notre Dame back. I have a hard time knowing what to do with those two just because I think there's some overlap with their skill set. I don't think either one of them are elite by any means, but they're both pretty solid. And we know that solid running backs going to Notre Dame is another good system, another thing you want a piece of. And then there are some other guys. I will say Derek Cooper, Texas back, most overrated running back in the class, unfortunately.
Ooh.
I wish I could say that I liked Derek Cooper more. The issue with him is just he's raw. He's just an athlete out there. He's got, I guess, gonna have enough size to him where maybe he's the biggest back in that backfield. But I think Hollywood Smothers, Raleek Brown are just gonna take over the roles there this year, and then they probably will bring in another highly touted guy or transfer next year. Derek Cooper just doesn't play the running back position. He just plays an athlete position, happens to be a running back kind of thing. Just not much laterally there with him, not much finesse to his game. But I mean, he's a fun downhill, fast runner. But again, I can't quite get behind that skill set. He's RB11 for me. So I guess I can't say I completely hate him. It's just he's higher for most people than what he is for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely have him a little higher just because of the landing spot. And I mean, he's not a terrible prospect, but that's what I was going to say is kind of like a final point before we get out of here and before we move on to next week. Is I sat here and talked about how like the composite score really does seem to matter for QBs. You know, like once we get below that like point, and it's an arbitrary threshold. I'm not saying there's an exact. I'm not saying 0.95 or anything around there is the exact line. I don't know exactly what that line is, but anywhere we get around there or around that 0.95 range, we're kind of done. I'm done. And for wide receivers, it's actually even more so than that. Like there's very few wide receivers, and that's the funny thing is, like I said, there's somewhat like Malik Neighbors was a 0.91 in the composite score. Jamar Chase, I believe, was very similar, like a 0.91 or maybe even a little bit lower than that. But yet they're absolute studs. But for the most part, the players that you want are your higher end 0.96 and above and everything. With the running backs, it's almost the complete opposite. Not to say it's not the opposite. Like obviously the high end talent is still the high end talent, but it doesn't matter nearly as much. We see players that are 0.89s that end up being studs. We see a lot of that. So I'm a lot more lenient with the running backs, and you won't hear me complaining as much about a guy being a 0.92 or anything like that, because if they go to a quality program, we've seen it work. And you know, a player that comes to mind is Texas with the running back. Now that I'm actually talking about him, my mind just went blank. But the running back that's been basically the lead running back for Texas the past couple of years. He's never been amazing or anything like that, but he's led the backfield there, and and we've seen all these high end top recruits going, and yet somehow that player keeps leading the backfield.
Yeah, yeah,
Trey
Trey Wisner, I
Wisner.
suppose.
Yes, thank you. And now he's
I
obviously transferred out, but like, I'm just saying like it with the running backs, it doesn't seem to matter as much. So that's why I tend to lean towards: do you have the size? Are you at a quality school? Things like that.
Yeah, no, those things definitely matter at the running back position, and some of the athleticism too. I look for absolutely. I will say that some of the cutoff scores, like yes, you've noticed that, but I think some of it's just kind of correlation versus causation, right? Like just because you
Sure.
fall below, 0.95, there's such a small sample through the years of guys who are from like zero point 0.9 to 0.95. It's like, yeah, I mean, the likelihood of having hits in any small narrow ranges are pretty low, and they get lower as you go down from 5 star to 4 to 3, etc. Right? There's a million 3 stars, so the hit rate of them is much lower too. But yeah, at the end of the day, there are some things that we can do to narrow down, and there's a lot of quarterbacks. We didn't even touch on all the guys who are within that 0.95 ish range. I don't know if we even talked about Bo Bentley going to Oklahoma or Jet Thamela going to Alabama, but those are also solid guys. A little bit lower for me, QB 7 and 8 in the class, but there are folks out there who like them, and they'll go pretty highly in supplemental drafts. So keep an eye out for them, and just a very solid quarterback class all around. I know we went through some running backs today, and I have a lot more that I'm excited about. So I honestly think it's a fairly solid class there, from top to bottom at the running back position, especially at the top end. But and can't wait to get into the wide receivers as well with you guys.
Yeah, we'll get into all that, and we'll get into some of the deeper names as well. Hey, if we have to make it into 3 weeks, we'll make it into 3 weeks. Who knows? Like, there's a lot of names to know, and we'll make sure that you know them all. Andy, you did not talk nearly as much, although I guess with Aaron being gone for half of the episode, you talked more than we probably thought you were going to. But because of that, why don't you give us some words of wisdom before we get out of here?
Um, 80% of the guys we've mentioned today will not be drafted in your dynasty rookie drafts. Maybe more.
I mean, it's the God honest truth. Like the 20% hit rate is pretty is pretty much what you can expect out of these draft classes. And so, it's I I've started leaning back towards the freshmen because of the fact that we don't have as many proven players. Now this year we're getting back to more proven players in college, but the past couple of years it's been like, hey, like who are you going to draft over the freshmen? Like there weren't too many players, but this year obviously we can probably say, hey, there's a little bit more of that. But even then, at some point you have to pivot over to the freshmen, and you have to say, hey, it's time to draft them. Our good friend Brett also has some words of wisdom for at least for some of us. And he says, "Don't drink beer near your laptop." So, maybe we'll take that and run with it. But yeah, we appreciate you guys listening. It's been a lot of fun. We appreciate Brett being there. We will be talking about these freshmen for the next week at least, if not more. And we will make sure that you know all of these names. We'll also be back with the rookies as soon as there's any new info or anything like that. I have an idea for a podcast where we're kind of like collabing with other content creators and things. And if we can make it work, it'll be really cool. We just have to make it all work time wise and all that kind of stuff. So a lot coming up in the future. Make sure you're liking, subscribing where you're supposed to. Apple Pods and Spotify, Gridiron ratings on YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're cashing out. See you guys.